All right. So yeah, so we're starting a whole new section tonight. This is the final section of the book. It's on prayer, and we're motoring through this. And a lot of these sections that, we're going to be reading big chunks. We're going to keep Frank busy tonight and following. So it means we're going to be getting through this book fairly quickly. So we'll have to think about what we're going to do next. So if you have any thoughts about that, definitely let me know. Text me, email me, whatever, with some ideas. And we'll talk about that in the next few weeks. But right now, the introduction to the prayer section on page 69. Did anyone have anything that they wanted to bring up before we dive into the text? All right. Tony, are you there?
I am here.
What am I looking at and why?
Well, if you can figure it out, let me know.
Well,
if
actually,
anybody
it looks like a picture of me.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's the Shroud of Brisbane.
Okay. And so the larger question is why would you do that?
Were you planning to leave?
Because you know why? It's because I was eating dinner and I didn't want you to see me eating dinner. But quickly, Dave, if I can do this really quick, tongue in cheek, okay?
Yeah.
But many years ago, I was going into the effect and you met me right at the door. This has to do with silence, because I was catching up today with last week's. And you stopped and I stopped and I looked at you and I said, namaste, okay, which is a gesture of respect for the Hindus, right? And you just looked at me and you were staring me right in the eyes and I was staring at you in the eyes and you said nothing, just silence. And I went with it. And then after, God, it seemed forever, I walked in, you walked in, and that was it. But my thought process was, what is the silence? Are you the father who's scolding me for using a different religion or what? But I'm saying this tongue in cheek. But it made me laugh because your silence was very different than what was talked about last week in that instance.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't be insulted by namaste. Maybe I was just acknowledging that my soul was seeing your soul. How about that?
I thought you were just tired.
That could have been too. You never know. It could have been one of those days.
Anyway, tongue in cheek, Dave.
All right. I was honoring the silence. That's what I was doing.
There you go.
See? Yeah, see? All right, Frank, page 69.
When Arsenius had asked for the second time, Lord, lead me the way of salvation, the voice that spoke to him not only said, be silent, but also pray always. To pray always, this is the real purpose of desert life. Solitude and silence can never be separated from the call to unceasing prayer. If solitude were primarily an escape from a busy job, and silence primarily an escape from a noisy milieu, they could easily become very self-centered forms of asceticism. But solitude and silence are for prayer. The Desert Fathers did not think of solitude as being alone, but as being alone with God. They did not think of silence as not speaking, but as listening to God. Solitude and silence are the context within which prayer is practiced.
I think it's important for us to keep in mind that contemplation is not navel gazing. All right. And this is something that really needs to be said, because it was one of the Thomas Merton talked about that there was no danger of the Desert Fathers practicing quietism. And I think we kind of glossed over that a little bit in that reading, but quietism was a form of contemplation that was so inward that it really didn't have many outward effects, at least in the minds of the detractors. And it was eventually declared a heresy in the Catholic Church. This was in the 14th, 15th centuries. But it was a movement that started in Spain, I believe, and then it kind of branched out through France. but it was so inward and it was so passive and static that it didn't have any outward push. This is not the way the Desert Fathers operated. They were very active, even if it was active in just keeping themselves alive by the manual work that they did, by the food they grew, but also by the charity that they displayed to each other and people that would come to seek them out. It was still an active form of spirituality, even though it was centered in silence. So the silence, the solitude, and the prayer was all, if he says the silence and the solitude are the context within which prayer is practiced, then prayer was the context within which their works and their words were practiced. Even if their words were very few, when they did speak them, it was kind of like, what was that when E.F. Hutton speaks, everybody listens, something like that, something. But when they spoke, it was to the point and it made sense. And so their silence, solitude, and prayer was what gave their works the impetus and gave their works the presence that made it relevant. So it's just an aside here that sometimes we look at contemplatives and it's just like, well, what are they doing? They're retreating from the world. We don't need people to retreat from the world. We need them to engage. Doug is going to engage. He's going to clean the bike trails and he's going to fix City Hall. He's going to do that, you see? So everybody can admire that. But hopefully Doug will also do it from a place of interior silence and prayerful awareness, because that'll make his work the most connective for the people that he serves.
Dave, it comes to mind that Richard Rohr's place in Albuquerque is a center for action and contemplation.
Exactly. And he makes a big deal about that. And of course, that's been for decades now. But there was always that balance that had to be struck. And he hits it right on the head, action and contemplation. And that's what the Desert Fathers were all about as well. So just a point to make. That it really did preface the action that they took in their communities. All right, continue.
The literal translation of the words pray always is come to rest. The Greek word for rest is Hezekiah.
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 Hezekiah. And hesychasm.
And hesychasm is the term which refers to the spirituality of the desert. A hesychast is a man or a woman who seeks solitude and silence as the ways to unceasing prayer. The prayer of the hesychast is a prayer of rest. This rest, however, has little to do with the absence of conflict or pain. It is a rest in God in the midst of a very intense daily struggle. Abba Anthony even says to a fellow monk that it belongs to the great work of a man to expect temptations to his last breath. Hezekiah, the rest which flows from unceasing prayer, needs to be sought at all costs, even when the flesh is itchy, the world alluring, and the demons noisy. Mother Theodora, one of the Desert Mothers, makes this very clear. You should realize that as soon as you intend to live in peace, at once evil comes and weighs down your soul through acidity.
Axidy.
Okay.
Like an accident, it's axidy.
Okay.
Axidia.
Sense of boredom, faint-heartedness, and evil thoughts. It also attacks your body through sickness, debility, weakening of the knees, and all the members. It dissipates the strength of soul and body so that one believes one is ill and no longer able to pray. But if we are vigilant, all these temptations fall away.
Okay, there's a lot in this section. The first thing to really point out is that this rest, this Hezekiah, is not the absence of conflict or pain. It's exactly what Jesus said when he said, do you think that I came to bring you peace? I didn't come to bring you peace. I came to bring you the sword. Okay, so the peace there that he's talking about is translates as calm or tranquility. And that's not what he came to bring us. But he is the Prince of Peace, as in Shalom, which is the greatest amount of health and connection and presence and all of that. So we can have both at the same time. And this is the important thing to understand. Rest doesn't mean tranquility here. Rest can be the centeredness and the stillness, the silence at your core, even in the midst of very intense struggle, as in the eye of the storm. So even in the midst of your day, as you're going through it, and everyone is clamoring for something at once. Here's Brother Lawrence, right? In the kitchen, when everyone's clamoring for something at once, and all the smoke and all the grease and all of the heat from the fire is going on, and you've got several pots boiling, and you're trying to get this thing out to the hungry monks, you can still have that Hezekiah at your core, that sense of rest. That is what is being cultivated as you spend time in contemplative practice. It gets down into your muscle memory. And so you're able to go about the various tasks of the day and the various incidents and levels of activity and stress of the day with that sense of Hezekiah still in place at your core. And then you get more into what Jesus was saying, right? He says, I didn't come to bring you peace, I came to bring you the sword. And that division that the sword represents is going to start in your own family. It's going to be husband with wife. It's going to be parents with children. It's going to be those closest to you are going to feel this change that you are moving soonest. They're going to be most sensitive to it. And they're going to resist it. People don't like change very much. They don't like the people that they're used to changing and going off in different directions either. And so there's going to be that rub right there. And the rub doesn't even have to be with other people. It's within yourself. Just like Theodora says, you should realize as soon as you intend to live in peace, live in Hezekiah, live in this type of contemplative awareness, then everything is going to break loose. Evil is going to come and weigh down your soul through axidia. And he said it's a sense of boredom, but really it's more of a lethargy. It's just a loss of energy. I don't know, what do you want to call it? Malaise? You want to call it ennui? Why is it always French words? But this complete sense of maybe even burnout would be a good way to put it. And I don't know if you've ever felt that before. Something that you were passionate for and you throw yourself in, and all of a sudden this overwhelming sense of, you just don't want to do it anymore. You just don't have the energy for it anymore. It just seems to be all drained out of you. From there to faint-heartedness, to evil thoughts, sickness, debility, weakening of the knees. It's like a full-on attack. It's almost like your body is rebelling and your mind is rebelling against what you're trying to do. It's amazing. Someone once said, when you sit down to meditate and you try to be still, everything starts itching. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. But everything, it's just like your skin starts to crawl and everything's got to scratch and you got to sneeze and you got to cough. And it's just like it's a conspiracy, against you. And it's amazing how that tends to work. And it's a pushing through that. I remember reading someone said, if you start to have an itch, just notice it, let it kind of rise and fall and go away on the back end. Well, a lot of times that's easier said than done. I told that to someone I was trying to, teach about meditation. They said, well, if it's really bad, can you scratch it? Yeah, you can scratch it. It's okay. But I don't know. Have any of you felt this kind of resistance, to the spiritual endeavors? I see your head going up and down, Becky. Can you give us a for instance at all?
Yeah.
What?
Uh-oh.
What are you thinking of, Doug?
No.
I just really, are you thinking of something? It's okay. No.
We all want to be a fly on the wall.
Even if I talk,
after
they
this
couldn't
is
hear
over.
me.
You
I'm on
realize I
mute.
listened to your conversation.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
what
not
were you
on
doing,
mute.
Becky?
Now you are. No, I was just really responding to your example of trying to do meditation where it's like nerve endings suddenly light up.
Yeah.
It's the most amazing thing. I find it so irritating. And then you're having all these thoughts about those nerve endings. So even if you don't scratch them, your mind's just filled with, so okay, let the thoughts go into a bucket, let the thoughts go into, I just find it very hard to do. Well, yeah, that's all. That's my resistance.
You know what, I've come to think of it as detoxing. It's like
Oh.
all the stress that you've stored up, and then you finally go into this repose and it's coming out your pores. It's not like the alcohol comes out your pores. It feels like detoxing. I remember when Marion and I went to the last longish vacation we went to was for our, maybe our 20th anniversary. And we went for 8 days to Hawaii, to the Big Island, where there really wasn't much to do. And it literally took me about 3 days of that kind of itchy, squirmy feeling before I could just be and just relax. And I just needed to detox. I needed to get that level of activity to a lower level. And you're going to feel that stuff. And as soon as you purpose to do something, all the excuses are going to come out. Why not? And pushing through that, especially at the beginning. Think of it as, the analogy is some kind of aerobic program or workout regimen or regime. You're not going to want to do it, and it's going to hurt, and everything in you wants to stop and doesn't want to get up and doesn't want to go out and all those things. But you press through that and get to where you're starting to see some results, and you're getting more energy, and then you can actually look forward to those sessions. And it's going to be the same thing here. But what she said, 1700 years ago is so germane, and it's all of us all the time. There's a universality to this, that is going to happen. It's amazing how that works. But I think it's important for us to know that going in. Know that we're not talking about the kind of rest that just makes everything a kumbaya moment, and suddenly all your problems are going to be behind you, and that we're going to have this kind of peace and tranquility. It doesn't work that way. So don't expect it to work that way. If you do, you're going to be severely disappointed, and you're probably going to get, resentful and frustrated with the whole process. And if you know going in that you're going to feel this way, at least in the beginning, then just be prepared for it and just kind of laugh at yourself when it happens. Don't allow yourself to get frustrated or stressed. Just watch it rise and fall, or go ahead and scratch like William just did, and then it's done. It's over, and then you move on. So.
Reading that last paragraph there, I very much thought of my type 9 position as the peacemaker on the Enneagram, where our passion is sloth. And
I'm sorry, your passion is what?
Sloth, laziness.
Which was another translation or another synonym for laxity, was sloth, okay. Slothfulness. Sloth. Yeah.
Okay. Because as he was describing that entire second part of like everything from Mother Teresa and coming all the way down, I've experienced that my whole life. Every time I've tried to be more present, like that is something that I need to fight. Like when I sit to meditate, I want to fall asleep. Like there's, and for people like myself who I don't feel mentally stressed, but I'll hold my stress in my body and I'll hold it as tension, basically. Like whenever I try to meditate and be silent and still, like that can be, this last week, I've tried to sit a couple of times and I must have lasted maybe 5 minutes on one of them, where it was just this, I'm just too tired to do this right now. And I was trying to calm myself down, and whatever stressors were creating that just shows up as a heaviness physically, even though I might not be experiencing a mental upset at the time. So.
I hear you, man. I feel you. Absolutely. But this is the prayer. That quiet time, that time spent in that place of presence and stillness, that is the prayer. And he's going to be contrasting that heavily in the next section on the prayer of the mind. and saying that that's not the way that we pray. And of course, he's talking about ministers here especially, and we are so mentally focused, that we have no balance often. And so this is the balance. If we can push through and do those sits, even if it is 5 or 10 minutes, at least at the beginning, until we can sit longer. And then, try the walking meditation, try the, even on the treadmill or whatever you do, where you can have a controlled way of keeping your body moving so that, it's not so stark, at least to begin with.
Mhm.
That can really help and take you to exactly the same place, and then eventually, like training wheels on a bike allow you to be able to back into just complete sit. But start wherever you need to and experiment with different types of meditation. Even experiment with earbuds in and listening to environmental sounds or something, if that helps to begin with. But try to use it like those training wheels so that you continue to back out, because ultimately where you want to get is to real stillness and silence, and be able to hold that there for that 20 or 30 minutes. That allows you to really get into that repose. So, but yeah, just be aware. This is the human condition. Whenever we try to do these second half of life things, this is what is going to happen. And so you just you're aware of it. It's going to come, no big deal. You just keep showing up and press through. But the structure and the discipline, that's where the structure and the discipline is really going to take you, if you have set out some kind of structure for yourself. So that's what Doug is going to find out. He's going to have to be setting his own interior structure. It's not going to be provided for him by the walls of the practice, right? Now it's got to come from within. So that'll be a whole different trip, won't it, Doug? All right. Go ahead, Frank.
Although weakness of the knees is not likely to be our main complaint, we ministers have no lack of excuses, often very sophisticated ones, for staying away from prayer. For us, however, prayer is as important as it was for the early desert fathers. Let me therefore explore the role of prayer in our daily lives. I will first express my suspicion that we tend to see prayer primarily as an activity of the mind. Then I would like to present the prayer of the hesychast as a prayer of the heart. Finally, I want to show how this prayer of the heart calls for a discipline in order to make it the center of our daily ministry.
Okay, so like he has with the whole book is divided into 3 sections, and then he usually has 3 main points for each of the 3 sections. And so he did that last section with silence, and he's doing it again. So the first point that he's going to make is to express his suspicion that we see prayer as a prayer of the mind. And then the second point he's going to make is to present the prayer that has a cast as a prayer of the heart, as opposed to the mind. Okay, that's going to be the contemplative prayer that we've been talking about. And then finally show how this prayer of the heart calls for a discipline in order to make it the center of our daily ministry. So that's what we were just talking about, that structure that is needed. If there is no structure, then there is not going to be a practice that is actually forming us in any way. Those 5 things I'm always harping about, that I say everyone needs these 5 things in order to feel meaning and purpose and a growing sense of identity. And that's community, accountability, structure, discipline, and service. And really the 3 are community, structure, and service. But what good is community if you're really not present to it? I mean, if you're a part of a community, but nobody's going to call you if you're not there, no one's going to notice if you're not there. I mean, to know that you're accountable to someone is that you will get called. Some of you, when you're not going to be able to even be here for Tuesday or Wednesday, you text me and you let me know. That's accountability. And if you don't, then I text you and say, where the heck were you? That's accountability. But it means that we are actually being seen. We are connected and engaged enough. But what is a community if it doesn't have structure? If it doesn't have regular gatherings, and at least weekly gatherings? I mean, there is really no community if it's not gathering on a regular basis. And the structure doesn't mean anything unless you're actually disciplined to the structure and show up. And then you have the opportunity for service, of course, everywhere along this. But he's basically making the same point, that this prayer of the heart, which can get so fuzzy. I mean, what's prayer of the heart? It's silence. It's not a formula. It's not a rote kind of prayer. It's not like the Our Father or anything that we can see. It doesn't have any edges to it. It's not even made of words. So it's so ephemeral. And if you leave it that way, it's not going to be able to do you any good. To build a structure around it that you're disciplined to. And it can be whatever works for you in your life. But to be disciplined to that structure that you set, now it's got some teeth and traction. Now it can actually aid you in your spiritual formation. Now it can start to get into your muscle memory, and that stillness, that hezekiah is something that can follow you even into the storms of your life. So these are the 3 points. So let's go ahead and dive into the first one. This is the prayer of the mind, and he's going to start off with one of his great characterizations that are so colorful.
Very few ministers will deny that prayer is important. They will not even deny that prayer is the most important dimension of their lives. But the fact is that most ministers pray very little or not at all. They realize they should not forget to pray, that they should take time to pray, and that prayer should be a priority in their lives. But all these shoulds do not have the power to carry them over the enormous obstacle of their activism. There is always one more phone call, one more letter, one more visit, one more meeting, one more book, and one more party. Together, these form an insurmountable pile of activities. The contrast between the great support for the idea of prayer and the lack of support for the practice of it is so blatantly visible that it becomes quite easy to believe in the ruses of the evil one, which Amma Theodora described in such vivid detail. One of these demonic ruses is to make us think of prayer primarily as an activity of the mind, that it involves above all else our intellectual capacities. This prejudice reduces prayer to speaking with God or thinking about God.
So that last line, I think, really sums it up well, that this mindset that we have, and especially in the West, and especially since the Reformation, and just continuing to grow, of prayer as basically being about thought, about mental activity, reduces prayer to speaking with God or thinking about God. And the moment that you think about something, we've gone over this so many times, the moment you think about something, you've already taken the step away from it. You've already objectified it, and you're no longer present to it. You're present to your mind that has created an image of the thing. You're not even dealing with a thing anymore. You're dealing with your image of the thing. You know, why were the Hebrews not allowed to make an image of their God? It's for the same reason. Now you're dealing with the image of the thing and not the God who stands behind the thing. But we do the same thing in our own minds as soon as we think about something. And not only that, the thing that we're thinking about is now static, because it's like a snapshot taken of a moving object. And that's a snapshot that you're holding on to, frozen in time at that age, right? At that moment. Now, the person that you took the snapshot of, they've moved on and they're doing something else and they've gotten older or whatever's going on, but you're just hanging on to the snapshot. And so as soon as we think about God, that's what we've done. We've frozen the image. And I always connect that to Easter morning. Why do you look for the living among the dead? The dead are static. The dead don't move anymore. And we're not going to find God among what's static, which means we're not going to find God in the graveyard of our minds of the things that we're thinking about, if you want to push the metaphor that far. And so this idea of being aware of something without thinking about it becomes really, really important. And just make sure that you realize you can be aware of something without thinking about it. You know, one of the easiest things is we're all sitting here, we're talking, and you're aware of your feet on the floor or where they are curled up underneath you, but you weren't thinking about them until I brought your attention to it. Now you're thinking about them, but you weren't before. And think about all the things you can be aware of. think about, you're working, you're presenting, maybe you're actually doing a presentation to someone, you're speaking to someone, you're teaching, whatever you might be doing, you're counseling, and you feel your phone vibrate in your pocket. You're aware that there's a call, but you're not thinking about it necessarily. If you keep the line of your concentration going, you can be aware that that's happening, but you don't think about it. If you do think about it, now you've broken the thread of whatever it is that you were doing. There are so many things during the day that we can be aware of. When you are taking a sensory walk and the instructor says, notice everything that's around you, be very aware of everything that's around you, but don't name it in your mind. That is practicing awareness without thinking about it. And that is the way that we are approaching God in hesychastic prayer. We are aware of these things, but we're not thinking about it. What Cynthia Bourgeault calls choiceless awareness. We're aware, but we're not choosing to think about any one thing. We're just there in the awareness of everything that's going on, thoughts, emotions, sensory input, but we don't think about it. And it doesn't break the concentration. It doesn't break the presence. So this is a really important distinction for us to make. And if you are trying to practice centering prayer, if you are trying to practice meditation, don't get distressed by the fact that there are still thoughts in your head. It's pretty much impossible to completely quiet your mind. Just don't think about the thoughts. You can be aware of them and not break the concentration of your prayer, the practice of presence. And I think this is exactly what Brother Lawrence is trying to tell us when he is in the midst of all of this activity in the kitchen. He's aware of everything he's doing, but his awareness is above the thoughts. And so he's able to keep the two going. He can keep all of the mental activity going. I should say he can keep all the physical activity going, but he can still keep that thread of awareness of God's presence along with it. It's a fine distinction, but I think it's a critical one for us to make, especially if we're trying to go into and engage contemplative practice.
Dave, I was wondering, I mean, you've been explaining this, but in your life, in your daily life, how do you balance this? Where do you stand in terms of, like Brother Lawrence, your daily activities as a pastor, as a counselor, all of the things that you do? Where do you find yourself in that description that you just gave?
On a good day, I'm approaching it, and I have good days and bad days like everybody else. The easiest for me to hit this mark that I'm talking about is when I'm with other people. Right now, when I'm with you, and when I'm in session, or when on Sunday morning, or any of the things that I do where I'm directly connected with people. That is the easiest for me to be able to do this. The hardest is when I'm alone, sitting at the computer and trying to do administrative work. That's when my mind wants to wander, because I don't have anything that seems as meaningful to me right in front. And so I have to work at it a lot harder if I'm doing this, and just try to continue to be present to the work, and I have to think about something, obviously, especially if I'm writing or doing something, but I try to make that the only thing I'm thinking about, and everything else goes into awareness without thought, choiceless awareness. So it depends on the activity, and it depends on the day, Tony, but that's my goal. I really have been, for the last few years, I think I've said this a few times, tried to subscribe more to the Brother Lawrence model, where I wasn't doing, as many prayer sessions. I was really trying to practice a seamless awareness of presence and practice of it. But lately I've been trying to get centering prayer back into my daily routine, because I realized there was some slippage there, and you gotta shore that up as soon as you realize I'm not doing as well as I used to do at staying present during the day. The mind is starting to take over, worry and stress is starting to set in. So then I need to realize that and start to shore up some of the weaknesses.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, Frank, continue.
For many of us, prayer means nothing more than speaking with God. And since it usually seems to be a quite one-sided affair, prayer simply means talking to God. This idea is enough to create great frustrations. If I present a problem, I expect a solution. If I formulate a question, I expect an answer. If I ask for guidance, I expect a response. And when it seems increasingly that I am talking into the dark, it is not so strange that I soon began to suspect that my dialogue with God is, in fact, a monologue. Then I may begin to say to myself, to whom am I really speaking, God or myself?
Have any of you felt that way? I have a journal entry from the early 90s that says almost this, verbatim. It's like, what the heck? I banged my head against prayer for years trying to figure it out. But I was getting the evangelical definition, and I love the way he says it. If I formulate a question, I expect an answer. We expect answers of God. I'd have people telling me, I'm going to go home and I'm going to pray all night until I get an answer. How'd that work out for you?
Good luck.
I know. If I ask for guidance, I expect a response. I mean, that was just baked into the cake in the church that I was at. That was the way it worked. And you would hear people telling you how God spoke to them and gave them the answer and told them what to do down to the smallest detail. And then I'm feeling like chopped liver over here because I'm not getting anything. And then, all of that insecurity and all of that sort of self, talk starts to kick in. Like Becky's always talking about, the critic starts to kick in. What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? And it just went into total negative returns for me. But I went round and round this. So I just was wondering if some of you have as well.
I'm not sure how to say this, but there's a thought swirling in my head that God promises to remind us of all things, even in the noise. And so there's a discipline, I believe, like you're saying, that's called for, but it isn't the only method or means or necessary if God's capable and reminds us and remembers us all things.
And have you experienced that, Doug?
Yes.
And how can you give us a way that it has manifested?
Out on the trail today, when I came out to the street, and a guy sitting there on the bike, and he says, "Hello, what are you doing?" It felt like a God moment. I didn't ask for it. I didn't pray for it. I didn't know to. I was open. I received it, but I didn't create it. I had a meeting a couple of hours ago with a man who I've met, and it was delightful. I didn't know it was going to happen. I didn't expect it to. He said he was going to introduce me to a woman who's doing social justice work as part of her employed work. I didn't know about that. I don't know if that'll be useful. There are people that walk by my house with dogs and they come up and say hello. I'm allergic to dogs, but I love it. Come back in with my eyes swollen and grateful.
That's great.
It's not that I prayed for it or knew it would happen. It's like breathing, the air is brought to us. But there's some point we need to be, I think, tuning something so that, but God can overcome our intellectual limitations, our hunger, our fears, our anxieties, our distractions. If there's something we're doing that's mustard seed level, not much, but let it in if we're being reminded. Where does that fit for you, Dave?
Was it fit for me?
Yeah. That you're being met without being asked to.
I've had the same kind of experiences you're having, but what it is, it's a matter of being aware enough to feel that they're actually happening in real time. Because so many, the truth is these things are always happening.
Yes.
We talk about God shots. Well, name a moment that God isn't shooting. God is always shooting. There's never a moment that he's not shooting. It's a question of whether we're tuned in enough. But when I'm tuned in, when I'm in that kind of presence, then I'm having the kind of exact experiences you're talking about. When someone pops into my head, and it'll just happen randomly, and then I actually act on it and ping them, send them a text or give them a call, And so many times it's like, how did you know to call me just then? You know, and it's just a kind of a moving into the flow of the whole universe, the movement of spirit, and being a part of that. And you're aware that you're part of it. And the sense of meaning and purpose and well-being that flows from that, it's amazing. You know, I was walking from just having coffee with somebody on a weekday morning, and we went to my favorite place on the other side of the train tracks in San Juan. And it's just, you feel like you're out in the middle of this rural area, and you're sitting under eucalyptus and jacaranda and drinking your coffee, and the train goes by. And it's just like, I'm walking away from that meeting and this sense of well-being. I'm just looking at the sky and the clouds. And then I made the mistake of thinking about it. This is really cool. And then it went away. No, that was an overwhelming sense of gratitude. But then I realized I did start thinking about it. You know, it's like you're walking through this amazing scenery and you're just filled with a sense of connection. And as soon as you say, I got to take a picture of this, and then you've stepped away from it again. You know, it's that kind of thing. But I know what you're talking about, those seemingly serendipitous type of connections that can be so meaningful. Or maybe they were just a one-time encounter and you'll never see that person again. You have no way of knowing.
True.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, because it's the moment in which you find the significance, the moment in which you find the connection that gives you the sense of meaning and purpose. And string enough of those together and you got a life, right?
Yeah.
So Dave, if those kind of moments happen and anyone tends to feel more of that place in connection with others, why do they have to meditate? Why isn't that adequate?
Well, if it is, great. But meditation is where we actually learn the technique. Meditation is where we can practice the discipline of being able to step away from and not choose to think about our thoughts. Our minds are so chaotic, and some of ours more than others. How do you practice this at all if you don't practice it? You know, and to practice it under controlled circumstances. I mean, my best way of thinking about it is a musician who goes into the practice room and runs scales all day. You know, where can you do that spiritually? Run your scales, not so that you can go into a practice room and run scales all day, but so that when you get on stage, when the smoke machine is going off and the strobe lights and the screaming crowd, that all of that is going to be there for you in the midst of all of that pressure and all of that stress, that you're going to be able to have that stillness in that place. And that stuff is there for you to be able to actually make music now. And it's the same way. That's what meditation is for. It's not an end in itself. I mean, it is to the sense that it can be very calming, and it can be a great start to your day. It can reduce stress and all those things. But what I see it as is the practice for being able to take that show on the road and be able to practice that as mindfulness now, and that awareness without thinking about it throughout your day. So if you can do that just mindfully during your day, just with the Brother Lawrence model, and not have to do any meditation, then by all means, don't do the meditation. Just go through your day and have that kind of experience of seamless and continuous prayer. But for most of us, we're going to need to practice that. It takes a while. And when you're first coming to this, you realize that your awareness is not real time. Your awareness is way back there someplace, and it has to catch up to you as you practice more and more. You'll become aware of things in retrospect, but that retrospect gets closer and closer until that great day when all of a sudden in real time, you're realizing, oh, okay, this is the choice I have to make, to be here or not. And it just takes time. So that would be the way I'd look at it. But if you don't need it, some of us are intuitive enough, I think that, yeah, you can probably do it without the meditation. Well, then, yeah, don't spend the time. Does that help, Becky? You know, I mean, yeah, this isn't just an exhortation to meditation. It's an exhortation to continuous prayer, understood as awareness of presence without thinking about it. And if you achieve that, then great.
You and I, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Danielle.
I was going to say, Dave, you and I have talked about the whole quid pro quo thing, with God, is that we think that if we pray a certain way or read our scripture a certain amount of time, that answers will or will not come. And then we have to make excuses up as to why our prayers weren't answered. And I'm just so done with making up excuses for that. I'm just really done with that. And so I noticed that I pray less, but my awareness, that opening, that walking meditation, the being awareness and being, fine tuning, being able to stay present and in the moment. That's what I choose to. But, you're a pastor. I have friends that still do the quid pro quo stuff, and they believe it, and that's their spiritual food and nourishment. So I don't disparage any of that. And when they ask me to pray, I will say a prayer, on their behalf. But to me, I look at us as energy beings, really. And so I am just pushing, peace and healing a certain way out into the cosmos. And if God wants to do anything with that or whatever, I'm just sending positive vibes and energy. And that's like granola talk from the granola peeps. But it is. But that's kind of what my prayer life is these days. Less words and more openness, just like that park thing that I do in the park. That's how it all started, was just being present in the park.
Mhm.
How could you not notice? But people go there and not notice, or not feel moved to connect, but that's just, I don't know. So I'm done with the quid pro quo.
Yeah, I'm right with you, Danielle. I rarely pray in words anymore unless I'm doing corporate prayer, praying with you all. That's the most I pray in words. And Sunday mornings, doing those meditations that I'll do at the Eucharist time or beginning and whatever, that's really the most I pray in words. If I pray in words for myself, it's a one-liner. It's like, God, I really need you this morning. And that's about it. And it'll come just out of that sense of just disconnection or whatever I'm feeling, or gratitude or whatever, but it's just simple. And then I go back into the wordless prayer. But for others who pray verbally, if you can live your life, again, being able to just meet life on life's terms and not have to medicate it away and live with a sense of hope and gratitude, then there's nothing broke to fix. Like you said, you don't disparage another person's prayer style if it really works for them. For me, it was a disaster to think that way because, I had too much of the interior critic going on, constantly banging away at the inside of my head and trying to figure things out. And so that didn't work for me. Contemplative prayer works for me. But if more evangelical style of prayer works for someone and they can live their lives that way, man, there's nothing to fix. So that it's where does this get us? Whatever paradigm you're operating through, does it get you to that place where you can live your life like a Brother Lawrence, like Jesus? Then great. Doesn't matter what horse you rode in on. Get to the barn. So that's it. So yeah, I'm right with you. But for me, and I don't ask for things anymore. I know you say you have not because you ask not, but I think the asking is more in terms of taking the faith steps, even though you're scared and you're uncertain, but you keep working for things. To me, that's more of the asking than simply verbally asking. But the only time I really ask for things is like kind of what you were saying, Daniel, is when people ask me to, will you pray for my healing? Absolutely, I'll pray for your healing. Of course I'm going to do that. And, if my son was sick in the hospital, I'd be praying for a healing, that it's just the way it works. But for myself and for things that I'm trying to accomplish, I don't really pray unless it's just to ask God to be with me during the process. I may do something like that, but it's just been an evolution with me. But I think it does kind of square with a lot of what's going on here. When you read the contemplatives and you read the mystics, you see a commonality to their style of prayer.
Mhm. When Doug was sharing earlier, and I think Anthony's question kind of made me think of this as well. It was like what I was hearing from Doug is like there was a sense of trust and a sense of freedom in terms of just how you were greeting the moment, essentially. Um, and I think that's kind of in the Brother Lawrence direction there, where if you trust and you feel free or unencumbered, then you don't have to think about you don't even have to think about God. In fact, if you're thinking about God, you're probably not in the moment.
Exactly.
One.
Mhm.
I want to add something. Hearing you, those things also don't happen. Have big empty times, and I think, where the heck is God? And I hold on to things that I think it's amazing. God meets us at where we are. I read something this week. The sun has always meant a lot to my health. The sun, and it's just a health issue. So it matters a lot. And I read something this week that matters a lot, that helps this whole thing we're talking about. That's amazing to me. And that's that, the sunlight in all its complexity, visual and non-visual, travels 93 million miles and gets here, and it helps with my health. Listen to this. This is what I heard this week, that some of you might know. It's nighttime here. You can see out, this is a window behind me. It's nighttime here. Do you know the sunlight coming through the earth on the other side of the earth is still affecting me? Sunlight rays go through the entire earth and come out the other side and still hit us during the night. That's astrophysics. And so that's something I hold on to and rest.
Mhm.
Nice.
Continuous.
I love those kind of images because they can ground you in a new kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things for me was that in just thinking about, where do the stars go at dawn? Well, they don't go anywhere. They're still right there where you left them. They're just behind that blue curtain of the sunlight that scatters in the atmosphere. And it's that constancy also became a huge metaphor for me. When I feel like these spiritual things are gone, it's only because the sun of my consciousness, the glare from it, has just obliterated it. And for me, what contemplative prayer is all about is setting the sun of my consciousness so that I can see the stars again. And that image was really helpful to me and grounding for me, because I can have sunset anytime I want. I can set the sun of my consciousness anytime I want and have that choiceless awareness. And I can do it during the day when I'm in the midst of all the craziness. And so those kind of images, especially the astronomical ones, I love those, Doug. So that's a great one. I hadn't thought about that, but obviously it's true. Not the visible rays, but the other ones are going through the earth and hitting you. Very cool. All kinds of metaphors you can use with that as well. Let's see, where are we here? Now, there's no good place to stop here because we're in the middle of a 3-page push to the next section. So I think we can probably just stop right there. No, I'll tell you what, read one more paragraph, Frank, and we'll close it off there.
Sometimes the absence of an answer makes us wonder if we might have said the wrong kind of prayers. But mostly we feel taken, cheated, and quickly stop this whole silly thing. It is quite understandable that we should experience speaking with real people who need a word and who offer a response as much more meaningful than speaking with a God who seems to be an expert at hide and seek.
There was an acronym that people used in the evangelical church that I was in a part of, and it was PUSH. Have you heard this before? PUSH. Pray until something happens. That was PUSH, right? And it was a big deal even for my mom as a charismatic Catholic. That was a prayer changes things and PUSH and these kinds of things. And that's not necessarily wrong or anything, but you can use it in a way that is really, I think, detrimental, and certainly detrimental to the hesychastic prayer that we're talking about. And especially if your prayer is only geared toward an outcome and a specific outcome that you're looking for, then you'll never be in the present. And the moment will never be good enough because you're only praying for a specific outcome that when it happens, then you can be in kingdom. Then you can be happy. Then, and of course, that time never comes. And so it's important for us to realize what we're doing to ourselves in the way that we approach our prayer. And so even though, yes, petitionary prayer is absolutely a part of our prayer life and our culture, but can we ask for things that we need and still find the enoughness in each moment to make it a sacred moment as well, a kingdom moment, and to have that kind of balance? Again, the Hebrew bride, anticipating this next thing that's going to come and sweep her up and take her away into a completely new life where she will be fulfilled as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, and yet at the same time be so present and so aware of the relationships that she has that will also be changing at that moment, that she's got that balance. That is the model for us of what human life is all about. It is that taking those dualities and bringing them into one space where they meet, where they merge. And that happens in contemplation, when we're not thinking about our thoughts, when we're aware without thinking about it. That's where everything comes together in a unitive way. And it is momentary, we'll move in and out of that kind of focus. But the idea is, right, 51%. Let's get to the point where more often than not, we are living in that kind of awareness. And then something really does happen. So on one hand, pray until something happens is right? But it depends on your attitude toward it and how you're approaching it, whether it's really taking you where you want to go or not. So.
Yeah. Dave, if I can just say something real quick. I have to admit that when I hear people say, God came on me to do this, or, God spoke to me to start a ministry, my ears burn, okay? My ears burn because I just think to myself, maybe you're talking to yourself, maybe I don't know, look at it differently than that. I kind of feel that it's not a responsibility taken there, even though, you're saying you are having this connection with God, which I'm not discounting that, but those kind of sayings in Christianity just burn my ears, and I've never been able to let go of that, no matter how close I feel my personal connection with God is.
Yeah. Sayings like that used to make me very envious because I wanted to have that kind of security and certainty as well. Now I realize it's just the way people express, the experience that they're having. And I'm imagining something about their expression of it that may have nothing to do with their experience of it themselves. And so I just listen to it and I take it as an expression of their devotion and their willingness to actually do something in a given direction, and just kind of let it go with that. But each one of us and I need to find my way of connecting with God's Spirit. How does God's Spirit, quote unquote, speak to me? It won't be in words, but how do I feel the prompting of that Spirit? And to me, it's the closest is what Doug was talking about. It's those moments where you just are aware how things are coming together in a kind of tapestry that you could never have even thought of, let alone weave yourself. and all these things are happening, and you're a part of this kind of dance. And that's the clearest way that God speaks to me. And it kind of, in answering your question earlier, Tony, on a good day, and it's usually when I'm connecting with people that I feel that connection, I feel that movement of spirit. But if I think about it, if I take out my camera, I've stepped away. So it's just a matter of actually being present to it. All right, that's enough for tonight. Good conversation, guys. Love it, love it. Scotty, could you give us a wordful prayer home?
Sure. Father, I know you've heard our study tonight and our conversations and our concerns and our desires. You hear it all. Your word says, pray without ceasing. And yet I understand when my friends and myself sometimes pray and we don't hear anything. How to make sense of that is sometimes difficult. But we have enough in the rearview mirror to show that you've always been there and you're always going to be there. So we offer up this simple prayer and just say thank you, Lord God, that you're so interested in our lives and that you've set things up. As unusual as the planets and the stars and the sky is, this planet is amazing. Plants, trees, animals, creatures that we can't even imagine. The complexity of life. Thank you for loving us and keeping us entertained, Lord. We love you, Father. Thank you for being with us. In Jesus' name we pray and give our thanks and say our amens. Amen. Amen.
Hey, y'all, I want to tell you one more thing. That prayer with the animals made me think of this. Listen to this. I saw on YouTube, well, just listen a second. And you might want to look up on YouTube. I bumped into one of those things that popped up. A woman scuba diver, maybe you've seen this,
Oh, this is cool.
in a steel scuba diving suit because she had dove for many years with sharks somewhere in the world. Same area, dove with sharks. And she was drawn to it and she studied them like 30 years. And a large shark would swim by her. This is like nonverbal communication and love and so forth. It swam by her and she reached out and touched it. And it was fine. It circled back and came to her. And this was filmed. You can see this. And it had a large hook in its mouth, this shark. And she touched the shark and she reached in and she worked and worked and worked, got that hook out, and the shark swam away and came back and put its head in her lap like a dog. And she pet it like a dog. And she would go away and come back and dive again. That shark would come back and she would pet it like a dog. It put its head in her lap. You can see it on YouTube. Now listen to this. Other sharks with hooks started coming to her and she's taken many hooks out of many sharks' mouth, out of the edge, including one where she reached inside and took it out. And these are large sharks. You can Google it, but this is nonverbal presence or prayer, I think. One.
That is amazing. Sharks are
You
smarter
just
than I
Google
thought.
it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Stunning.
The most amazing thing is that other sharks started coming.
Yes.
What are they actually talking to each other here? What's going on?
Just about to say something more is going on to this story than meets our eye or our ear.
That is too cool. I'm going to look that up.
You can Google it. I think it's real. I think it's real.
Did you take it to Snopes? Do we know?
Yeah.
Hey, Doug.
I just watched The Octopus Teacher you told us about.
Yes.
Isn't
Yeah,
that
that's
great?
the one that I was going to mention.
That was insane.
Wasn't it?
Is that a documentary, William?
Yes.
It's on Netflix, and Scott was talking about it last week, and I watched
It's
it.
really
It was
good.
brilliant.
Very
Yeah.
good.
I'll have to check
Very
that out.
good.
Oh, do.
You would
Yeah.
like it, Dave.
It's called My Octopus Teacher.
My Octopus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you
All right,
Sunday.
bye.
Good night.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, Sherry. Oh.
Night, can you hear me?
Hey, we can hear you. You
Hey.
fixed it. Good job. Good job. All right. Enjoy your doggies.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, Linda.
Good night.